Liwei had been expecting the man to arrive the following day, yet here he was, standing at the door. The man's attention, however, was not on Liwei. It was fixed entirely on Amara, who stood quietly beside him. His gaze lingered, sharp and calculating, before they all stepped inside. Liwei instructed Amara to go to her room for the time being, and she obeyed without question. As she disappeared from view, the man's expression hardened. The moment she was gone, his frustration became evident. He accused Liwei of losing focus, of forgetting the mission, and of allowing himself to become distracted. Liwei countered that he could never lose sight of their purpose, but the man pressed on, demanding to know why a random girl was living in his house. He reminded Liwei of one of their most important rules. Never become emotionally attached. Never let the guard drop. Liwei insisted he was not emotionally attached, only helping someone in need. The man's lips curved into a humorless chuckle, telling him that this was exactly how emotional attachment began. It started with the need to help, followed by listening to someone's sad story, which stirred empathy and pity. Soon after, the instinct to protect emerged, and from the look of things, Liwei was already too far in. The man cited the signs, allowing her to stay in his home, draping his jacket over her shoulders, and treating her with a familiarity that was far too dangerous. His voice then took on a darker edge as he questioned whether Amara was not the same girl who used to stand by her bedroom window watching him, and whether she was not related to May and James, the very people on their list of suspects. Liwei hesitated but eventually admitted that it was her. Yet he claimed she was different, and that others wanted her dead. The man's anger deepened, accusing Liwei of trusting her far too much without knowing her true intentions. He warned that her presence could be a calculated move to get close to him and end his life. His disbelief was clear. He had been away for only a few days, and already Liwei seemed to be disregarding the principles they had lived by for a decade. For 10 years, they had been planning, 10 long years spent preparing to take revenge against those responsible for Liwei's family's deaths and to reclaim everything that had been stolen. Now, at the crucial moment, Liwei appeared to be letting it all slip. But Liwei reaffirmed his commitment. He knew exactly why he had returned: to avenge his family, to restore the empire his father had built, and to bring down those who had destroyed them. His voice grew heavy with emotion as he admitted that it killed him every day to watch the suspected murderers live in luxury, enjoying what his father had built with his blood and sweat. He vowed not to rest until every one of them was crushed, and he stood once again as the rightful heir to his family's empire. The man's tone softened slightly. He stepped closer, placing a firm hand on Liwei's shoulder, and reminded him of the truth. The uncle who had pretended to welcome him had been one of the very people who plotted his death while he was away. There were likely more who had benefited from his family's demise, and they all knew he had returned for revenge. They were watching, and they were plotting against him. At this point, there could be no weakness, no softness, no ties to anyone who could compromise the mission. And Amara, by her mere presence, was a threat, a potential weakness that could destroy everything. The man insisted he was not being cruel, only reminding Liwei of the brutality of his family's murder. Liwei's father had been like a brother to him, and though not related by blood, he felt bound to help his son take vengeance and reclaim what had been stolen. But there could be no humanity, no mercy, until the mission was complete. Humanity could be reclaimed only after the goal was achieved. For the first time, Liwei fully realized how dangerously close he had come to losing sight of the mission. The thought that he had almost become emotionally attached to Amara unsettled him. The man made his final demand. Liwei had to cut her off, sever whatever bond had begun to form, and let her fight her own battles. His own fight was far too great to risk for anyone else. If Liwei failed to do so by the next day, the man would abandon their mission entirely. Liwei agreed, promising to end it. The man reminded him that this was the last warning. One more mistake, and the mission would be over. With that, he left. Liwei stood alone, his mind spinning. He sank into a chair, closing his eyes, forcing himself to remember the night his family was slaughtered. The flames, the deafening screams, the smell of burning flesh. The memories were the only thing strong enough to sharpen his resolve. Just then, Amara emerged, her face bright with a smile as she asked if his meeting was over. Liwei did not look at her. He remained still, eyes closed, unmoving. Her smile faded as she asked if something was wrong, or if the man had said something to upset him. Opening his eyes, Liwei rose to his feet, his gaze fixed on her. He told her she needed to start figuring out her own problems because she had to be gone by tomorrow. Without waiting for her response, he walked away, leaving Amara standing in stunned silence. She could not understand the sudden coldness. She had thought he was beginning to warm up to her, but now he seemed just as distant as when they first met. The following day, Liwei sat in his office, deep in thought. He knew Amara would not be able to come up with a solid plan on her own, so he would have to intervene. His options were limited. He could either help her retrieve her passport and buy her a plane ticket back to her country, something complicated, since it would mean dealing with May and her husband again, or he could find another way entirely. A sudden idea ignited in his mind. He called for his assistant, who entered promptly and asked if he required anything. Liwei informed him that he wanted to award an international scholarship to one additional student. The assistant reminded him that the scholarships had already been awarded to 5 students, which was the exact limit allowed by the university's rules. Adding another would violate regulations. Liwei's expression sharpened as he reminded the assistant of who he was. The university belonged to his family, and if he chose to bend the rules, no one would dare stop him. The assistant hesitated, warning that the upper management would not approve. Liwei rose from his seat, approached him, and demanded to know whether he had forgotten who had built the university and sacrificed countless days and nights for it. It had been his father, and his father had been the upper management. Now that his father was gone, Liwei was the upper management. He stared into the assistant's eyes, challenging him to defy him. Shaken, the assistant apologized, promised to do as requested, and left, visibly afraid. Later that day, Liwei headed to East Gate Group, having been summoned for a meeting. He pulled over and sat in his car for a moment, staring at the towering corporate building that had once belonged to his family. The very building and company his late father had built from nothing. Now it was occupied by people who did not deserve it, people who might very well have been responsible for his family's brutal deaths. Stepping out of the car, he walked inside. Employees rose as he passed, whispers spreading that the true heir of East Gate Group had arrived. He heard them but ignored them, walking steadily down the hallway. His gaze fell upon a large portrait of his uncle hanging prominently, bearing the title East Gate President, the very place where his father's photo had once hung. Rage flared within him. He wanted to tear it down, but he restrained himself. The mission demanded patience. If he was to bring them down, he would have to play the fool and never reveal the part of himself that longed to destroy them all. While he stood there, an assistant approached to inform him that the CEO was waiting. Liwei followed her into the office, now occupied by his cousin Feng, the self-assured son of his uncle. Feng sat comfortably in the CEO's chair, his demeanor filled with arrogance. From the moment Liwei entered, Feng took the opportunity to assert dominance. He reminded Liwei of his position, dismissing his authority as a mere university director, and reveled in the reversal of fortune since their childhood. He recalled how Liwei once flaunted his wealth and position, and now claimed that the tables had turned, that his own family controlled East Gate Group, while Liwei was left with scraps. Liwei remained still, his eyes locked on Feng, betraying no emotion. Inside, he wanted to speak, to unleash years of pent-up truth, but the mission required silence. Instead, he stated that he had left important work at the university to attend this meeting and asked what Feng wanted. Feng accused him of forcefully awarding another student a scholarship against the rules. Liwei confirmed it without hesitation, explaining that the student was exceptionally talented and capable of putting the university on the map, which justified the decision. Feng dismissed the explanation, insisting that rules could not be changed at will, and openly questioned who Liwei thought he was. He asserted his own power as the current head of East Gate Group, threatening demotion if Liwei did not learn his place. At that moment, Liwei's uncle entered the room. As the current president of East Gate, he had taken over the company after Liwei's parents died, supposedly holding it in trust until Liwei was old enough to lead. His presence commanded the room. Without hesitation, he overruled Feng, approving the scholarship and stating that Liwei, as university director, had the authority to make such decisions. He praised Liwei's work at the university and urged him to visit his family more often, reminding him that although his parents were gone, the family was still his family, and he was always welcome. Liwei responded with polite acknowledgement, though inwardly he recognized the kindness as hollow. A wolf in sheep's clothing. His mind burned with the desire to repay his uncle with a pain far greater than he could imagine, and to expose him for the devil he truly was. But he hid it well behind a mask of civility. His uncle then excused him, acknowledging the work waiting for him at the university. Liwei departed without delay. After he left, Feng, still fuming, demanded to know why his father allowed Liwei to act freely. He insisted that it was obvious Liwei had returned with ill intentions, pretending to be naive to lower their guard. His father's reaction was swift and violent. He struck Feng across the face and warned him to keep silent, especially about the brutal way Liwei's family had died. Bringing it up could awaken thoughts of revenge. Feng persisted, arguing that revenge was exactly what Liwei was after and begging his father to destroy him before he acted. His father dismissed the idea entirely, threatening to demote him and remove him from East Gate if he continued. With that, he left the room, leaving Feng standing there, frustrated that his father could not see through Liwei's deception. Feng's thoughts turned to the years they had grown up together. He knew Liwei too well to be deceived so easily. Unlike everyone else, he was certain that Liwei's return was not as innocent as it appeared. Amara sat in the living room, waiting for Liwei. She had packed the clothes he had bought for her, ready to return them and move out, just as he had instructed. As she sat there, her thoughts wandered to the embassy, how she could tell them everything and hope they would assist her. She wondered what had suddenly come over Liwei. She noticed he was beginning to soften toward her, even if only slightly, as if the cold switch inside him was slowly turning off. Lost in thought, the door opened, and Liwei walked in. Amara immediately stood and approached him, relieved that he was finally back. Liwei kept his eyes fixed on her, waiting for her to speak. She handed him the paper bag containing the clothes and expressed appreciation for the care and support he had given her. She explained she was returning his belongings because she was moving out, as he had requested. Liwei glanced at the bag, then looked back at her, telling her he had bought the clothes for her and there was no need to return them. Amara insisted she did not want to feel indebted to him. Hearing this, Liwei told her that he was afraid she did owe him. Rescuing her and crossing his own boundaries had been significant sacrifices, and to him, she did owe him. Her voice trembling, Amara asked how she could repay him. Without hesitation, he grabbed the paper bag from her and placed it on the couch. Then, taking her hand, he told her to follow him. Amara walked alongside him, uncertain of his intentions, but unable to resist the pull he had on her. There was something about him that drew her in, Despite his cold and sometimes detached nature, the force was too strong for her to fight, and she did not understand it herself. Liwei led her into the gym room. Amara looked around and then glanced at him, silently asking why he had brought her there. He explained he was going to teach her self-defense techniques. Amara was caught off guard, but before she could respond, Liwei continued, telling her that with dangerous people like James around, she was always at risk. At the very least, she needed to know some self-defense in case something happened. She couldn't remain weak and helpless forever. Amara looked at him, quietly agreeing with what he said. He was right, and it made sense. Liwei removed his tie and began unbuttoning his shirt. Amara stood there watching him, hating herself for the feelings that stirred within her. She knew she shouldn't feel that way, yet every move he made seemed deliberate, as if he were intentionally drawing her in, making her fall for him on purpose. As he slightly unbothered his shirt, she observed him, attractive yet aloof and distant. She wondered if it was okay for her heart to beat faster for him, and if he ever felt the same, or if his heart had grown too cold to feel anything anymore. Liwei slowly walked toward her. Her heart pounded as he stood in front of her and sharply stared into her eyes, as he always did. He asked if she was ready. Amara nodded silently. Without hesitation, he grabbed her swiftly and turned her around. Standing behind her, he clenched his arms tightly around her waist. Amara's heart nearly stopped.